All right, well, let's get started. The presentation today is called Health and Medications. Do I really need all of these drugs? It is presented by me. I'm Mike Buzzy. I am a Master of Science in Oriental Medicine, and I'm a functional Chinese medical practitioner. I've done a few things, and I've got 42 years in healthcare. In the center of the screen is my master's thesis, which was published actually in 1986. Finished that up in 84. Took a couple years to get into the journal, Comparative Training Responses to Rope Skipping and Jogging. There's a few other things. Upper right corner is Rocky Blyer, who's a native of Appleton. Those are Super Bowl rings on my fingers. It's hard to see that. Rocky is a former professional football player who played for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and met with him because of the amount of veterans administrative work that we do here at our Eastwind healthcare practice. Lower right-hand corner is a friend of mine, Carrie Oberbrunner, who did a TED Talk in Oshkosh last year, featured on a magazine cover, Nature's Pathways, taught a class on the ABCs of running a practice, and so on. So 42 years worth of experience. I am not a doctor. The information in this presentation is for informational purposes only and should not be seen as a substitute for a relationship with your healthcare provider. Please consult your health professional before making any changes to the medical treatments prescribed or recommended to you. So I'd like to begin with our thoughts are the steering wheel of our destiny. Hopefully, we can shift our thoughts a little bit this evening. At Eastwind, we find most of the people we talk to are very frustrated by the answers they're getting from the typical healthcare system. What we do, we help people find better answers. We help to simplify complex things. What we believe, that health comes factory installed. Health is innate within us. It is not something that needs to be put there from the outside. It's something that needs to be nurtured, grown, uncovered from the inside, unencumbered. What people need is help to get it back. Why we do what we do. Eastwind story is my story. I started out as a school teacher, and then when the prospects of teaching were not that great, I decided to gain more technical expertise in the area of exercise, and I got an exercise physiology master's degree. Kind of maxed out as an exercise scientist working in cardiac rehabilitation. And they told me if I wanted more money, raises, I would need to go into management. So from the management, that was not really consistent with my skill set. I did well for a couple of years and kind of topped out there. Then I began to study traditional Chinese medicine to connect with um, healthcare and more natural approaches. And then fast forward, I started Eastwind Healthcare, and I was sitting in um, a funeral of one of my wife's best friends, and I had the realization that the death of that gentleman could certainly have been prevented. He had diabetes. He was overweight for quite some time, but I watched him um, refuse to change his behavior, and he lost his toes, then his feet, um, and then ultimately his life. And I was angry because I realized that his wife wanted him, and he had left her quite a sum of money, but it wasn't the money she wanted, it was him. And I was angry at him because he just refused to take care of himself. It was like a slow suicide. And I realized that's happening around me and that I had information that I could, if I shared it, strongly enough and was convincing enough that I could prevent others, excuse me, prevent others from reaching that same fate and dying prematurely. So it was kind of like, what does it take to beat diabetes and lifestyle illness? And that is where Eastwind comes in. I want all of us to think about something. The successes we've had in our life, if we think about this, in the upper right-hand corner of this diagram is it's a number one, and it says commitment. And commitment is necessary for us to proceed and succeed at anything. So think about a time that you were quite successful in your life, you'll realize that in order to reach that success, you needed to have a commitment to accomplishing what you were setting out to accomplish. And then you probably realize that at some point after you made that commitment, the commitment is tested. And you realize this is harder than I thought it was going to be. And it takes courage to continue. And when you have courage and you apply your courage, what you will do is you will develop a new capability. And because you develop that capability, it gives you confidence. And then you may not realize, but I do, you completed this cycle so that you could do it again. And this is our life. This is the challenges that we face. We commit to overcoming the challenge. We need courage to get through. We develop a new capability, something that we didn't know how to do before or didn't know how to do as well as we do now. We get confidence and the cycle goes on and on. And if you think about your success in life, you will realize you went through this process every time you succeeded at something. So we're going to talk about some commitment tonight and maybe a little bit of courage, but it starts with commitment. And so keep that in mind as I go through the presentation. We have a lot of chronic disease. In the 2020s, I have some statistics. 129 million people in the United States out of the 300, and what do we have, 316 or something like that now? 129 million people in the United States have at least one major chronic disease, and these would include heart disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity, or hypertension. And this is from data from the CDC. As of 2024, 6 in 10 US adults have chronic disease at 60%, and chronic diseases account for the majority of the nation's healthcare spending. Now, politics aside, what Bobby Kennedy is talking about when he talks about chronic illnesses, and you can't really argue with that our food supply is crappy, and we're going to see that as we go through this presentation. But if the majority of the nation's healthcare spending is based in chronic disease, and chronic disease is a lifestyle disease, then we really need to get at the root of the problem in order to fix it, rather than trying to just medicate it and manage it. If we manage it, it's not going to decrease the spending, it'll probably increase the spending. And the healthcare industry is a $3.5 trillion industry. It is huge. By the way, keep that in mind as we go through this, because it doesn't want to change. It is happy like it is. Estimates are by 2050, 142.66 million adults aged 50 and older will have at least one chronic condition, representing a 99.5% increase from where we were in 2020 as we were in COVID just 4 short years ago. That is NIH data, National Institute of Health. What's the common denominator in chronic illness? The answer is inflammation. Inflammation disrupts normal function at the cellular level, at the system level, at every level of your function. Inflammation is disruptive. Signs of inflammation include heat and redness, swelling, pain, loss of function. This is happening at a micro level and a macro level in your body. So how does the healthcare industry address this? And the answer is they make a lot of money because they manage it. So how about the government fixing healthcare? Remember Obamacare that was going to fix things? Well, this is compensation of the CEOs of, I think these are healthcare conglomerates, I guess. Centene and Cigna, Humana, 21, 19, 27, 8, 21 million for these CEOs. This is a year. Not quite what some NFL quarterbacks make, but getting close. Pharmaceutical industry, how about them? Drugs for health. 46.6 million, 48 million, 32 million, 47 million, 118 million. Regeneron, wow. So Pfizer, that 47 million for Pfizer. And this is 2018. This is before COVID. And then 32.6 million for the CEO of Vertex. So what about the food pyramid? That helped things? I saw a discussion about the food pyramid, and somebody said that they were devastated when they found out the food pyramid wasn't real, is what they said. And so here's the food pyramid. What they're saying is that it's not based in making you healthy. It's not based in science, the science of making you healthy. It's based on the science of the food industry. And the food industry is a $6 trillion industry that makes food, that makes food. That makes food. They want you to eat food they make. If you think about that, nature doesn't, I guess nature makes the only food. The food industry makes food-like substances that they tell you are healthy for you. So how about Americans' health habits? We got good exercise habits anyway. I do. Now, this one I have not seen, but there is a guy in my neighborhood that walks his dog with his scooter. I should be nice because he might have something terribly wrong with him, and the dog is getting exercise at least, and he's probably being a good pet owner by getting out on his scooter at least. So the question is, do drugs help? Prescription drugs cause over 128,000 deaths per year in the United States. The word cause, and another 200,000 deaths in Europe. Death by medicine. By medicine. The estimated total death of iatrogenic deaths, or the estimated total number of iatrogenic deaths, and iatrogenic means unintended consequence of treatment. These are not people who died from the disease they had. They died from our efforts to correct the disease. Deaths induced inadvertently by a physician or a surgeon or by medical treatment or by diagnostic procedure is 783,936, while 535,251 die of cancer. So people killed accidentally by medical procedures, medical processes exceeds the number of people who die from cancer. What about lowering cholesterol? Well, there's something you should know about cholesterol in that it is naturally occurring in all cells in our body. And this idea of lowering it is interesting. And let me take you back because I have been in healthcare for 42 years. When I started in cardiac rehabilitation, and there was no drug to lower cholesterol level. And I was kind of convinced early on that cholesterol had a lot to do with heart disease, but they weren't doing anything about it. So I was all for, you know, shouting about cholesterol and reducing it from the mountaintops. But the medical world was not really interested in it until Lopid came along, Lopid, Lopid. That was the first cholesterol lowering drug, and it wasn't a statin, I do not believe. I should look this up, but the statins followed shortly thereafter. And so when we talk about statins, we talk about atorvastatin, rosuvastatin, simvastatin, and so on. When a drug name starts with something and ends with statin, it is likely a cholesterol lowering drug. It's a uh, coen, uh, co, uh, coenzyme reductase inhibitor. That's not quite right, but it's close. So Lipitor, which is atorvastatin, lowers your risk of a heart attack by 36%. Let me tell you what that study actually showed. It showed that if you were a male aged 45 to 54 and you had a heart attack in your past, the chances of you dying from a heart attack in the next year was 2.9%, I believe. No, it was 3.1% if you did not take a statin, and it was 1.9% if you did. So therefore, going from 3.1 to 1.9 was a 36% reduction in relative risk. So then this gets twisted around, and doctors are not statisticians typically, and some doctors actually believe that they reduce the patients. If they give this to 100 patients, that 36 of them won't have heart attacks. That's not the way the statistics work at all. First of all, only 1.9% of them were destined to have heart attacks to begin with. And by taking the drug, they got down to 1.1. So they advertise the upside and minimize the downside. Now, let's just look at something here that I find to be very interesting because we've invested a lot of that $6 trillion, or I'm sorry, $3.5 trillion medical industry in managing chronic illnesses, in treating chronic diseases, in getting blood pressure corrected, in getting cholesterol corrected, in getting blood sugar corrected, and so on and so on. 4 studies in 2010 involving more than 33,000 people indicated that medications did not reduce the heart disease despite lowering the blood pressure, lowering the blood sugar, lowering the cholesterol, or any combination of those things. So let me translate this. It is saying that lowering the numbers with drugs does not lower the risk. Lowering the numbers with drugs does not lower the risk of a heart attack. Isn't that interesting? So there must be something more than just the number that's contributing to the problem. That artificially suppressing the number with a drug is not correcting the problem. In fact, the study revealed many devastating side effects, including an increased risk of a cardiac event. And this came from some rag like, oh, the National Enquirer? No, it came from the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the most prestigious medical journals in the world in history. Now, not everybody agrees on statin drugs. There is a book called The Great Cholesterol Myth, and there are medical doctors and cardiologists and who are basically saying this whole statin thing's been overblown. They have overblown the benefits and underestimated the risks. Statins are the single worst group of drugs for your brain, and memory loss is now required to be listed as a side effect on the label. So how many of you out there are worried about your memory, dementia, Alzheimer's? Statins will hasten that. Why? 1/4 of your brain is composed of cholesterol. Cholesterol is necessary for memory, learning, and fast thinking. cholesterol is needed to make neurotransmitters. Statins have been pushed on the public because they are among the most profitable prescription drugs in the world. Statins are a trillion with a T. So of the 3.5 trillion, 1 trillion, well, 3.5 is the United States, but statins worldwide, $1 trillion industry. 1 in 2 senior men and 1 in 3 senior women are taking these drugs. That's according to Medscape Medical News reviewed by Dr. Michael W. Smith in 2015. So have we been misled by the evidence? And as I said, total sales are in excess of $1 trillion of statins. Concerns over exaggerated benefits and underplayed risks. Do you know that when the first statins were approved, you have to submit documentation to the FDA, and the documentation on the negative effects, the side effects of statins was presented to the FDA. They were not able to keep the information. The pharmaceutical companies that were developing statins claimed that information, and they put it under lock and key. It is no longer visible to anyone, and they're saying it's proprietary information. So here's the question. How can you and your doctor make a quality decision about the risks and the benefits if the risks are no longer available to look at? And if there's nothing to hide, why are they hiding them? The raw data on efficiency and safety of statins has been kept secret and have not been made available to other scientists. This is not scientists, people, or this is not science, I mean, people. Science is opening your theory up to further scrutiny to see if it continues to hold water. This information was pulled from the the British Medical Journal in 2018. What is the real cause of chronic illness? Said before, it's inflammation. And it's interesting because there are people who believe, and I'm one of them, that one of the ways that statins are shown to be beneficial is an unintended effect of reduction of inflammation. But at what expense if you're screwing up the cholesterol production in the body, and cholesterol is such a necessary thing in the body? So there are 4 causes of inflammation. Let's forget about the cholesterol for a minute. But by the way, the pharmaceutical industry has spent billions of dollars to prove that cholesterol causes heart disease. And if you ask the average person on the street, does cholesterol cause heart disease? You probably get at least 7 or 8 out of the 10 saying yes. And the answer to that question is truly, they've never proved it, despite spending billions of dollars to do so. They've never been able to prove it. And at some point, after 30 years, maybe it's 50 years now, and billions of dollars, if you can't prove something causes something else, maybe it doesn't. One of the analogies that I've always heard is that if you're driving along the highway and you see an accident and you notice that there's police cars there, you know, those damn police cars cause more accidents than whatever, than anything else I can think of. That's like saying when a person has a heart attack, there's cholesterol there. Well, the cholesterol is actually part of the repair process of the artery. It is the inflammation which actually caused the damage, and that is what we're going to get into next. It's like, what is the true cause of chronic illness? Inflammation. What are the causes of inflammation? And there are 4 main categories of them. The first one is physical trauma. We get in car accidents, we fall on the ice, we injure ourselves. Physical trauma, damage to tissue, trauma to tissue causes inflammation. Joints get inflamed, muscles get inflamed, and then organ systems get inflamed too. The second is chemical trauma or chemical causes. And chemical causes can be anything from drugs that are prescribed to us to chemicals in our food supply to preservatives, to chemicals that are like glyphosate that goes on crops, to xenoestrogens, which are in um, skincare products that we put on our skin that are absorbed through our skin. There's several inflammatory substances that are chemical in nature. We breathe them in, or we ingest them in food, or it comes in through our skin. But in any case, chemicals can cause inflammation. A third source of inflammation is emotional, so that we know when we get stressed out, right? It's like, what is that? Well, stress, there's a cortisol response to stress, and cortisol is a stress hormone. And when it gets out of balance, it causes an imbalance of several other hormones too. We should be able to create a bunch of cortisol, flood our system with cortisol in an emergency. And when the emergency passes, that cortisol is swept back out and is processed out, and we come back down to a resting level. So that's going from fight or flight to a relaxed state. If we get stuck in that fight or flight, we end up with excessive amounts of cortisol, which is a hormone, and it creates imbalance in our other hormones, and we are chronically stressed out. By the way, PTSD would be part of the emotional stuff too. And PTSD is created in situations of fear and anxiety when we are too stressed out to be able to effectively manage situations and we get triggered. So anybody experience any of that in their daily life of people being triggered for no apparent reason? PTSD is all around you. COVID really created a lot of PTSD. The fourth cause of inflammation is immune. Now, your immune system, when you get sick, creates inflammation. Why? Because it's fighting an invading organism or organisms, right? It should be temporary. The physical should be temporary. The chemical should be temporary. The emotional should be temporary. Inflammation is a function of the immune system that is used to protect you. But if the inflammation does not subside once the acute condition is finished, then you become chronically inflamed, and that is what all of our disease states involve. That's what we're talking about. Now, with the immune system, you can get into an autoimmune state, which means auto means like self, and your immune system is attacking you. It's attacking your joints, it's attacking your organs, it's attacking your thyroid, and so on. So Hashimoto's thyroiditis is the most common form of hypothyroid, and it is autoimmune. That means your immune system created antibodies that doesn't like your thyroid. It's bullying your thyroid. It's beating it up such that the thyroid cannot produce enough thyroid hormones to balance your system, and you start having symptoms and problems. Lupus is a autoimmune disease. Crohn's is an autoimmune disease. Ulcerative colitis is an autoimmune disease. Sjogren's is an autoimmune disease. And I will tell you that it is my belief, because of the chronic inflammatory nature of our chronic diseases, that there is at least an autoimmune component to every single one of them, that your immune system is turning against you. It's creating inflammation that is turning against you and causing more damage than good. So we need to get the inflammation calmed down. We need to get the immune system balanced. Now, in your digestive process, it's a really important part, because this is where a lot of the chemicals come in of the food that we eat. And so this is what there's a barrier here that lets in certain things and prevents other things from entering. When your digestive process is damaged, the barrier does not do its job. It's kind of like a bouncer at a door. It lets some people in and not others, right? So your epithelial wall in the lining of your intestine is supposed to let certain things into your system so that you can use the nutrition from the food that you ate. You should be letting in amino acids and it should be letting in fatty acids and so on, which are the smallest parts of the proteins and the fats and the carbohydrates that we eat It's the smallest pieces and parts that get let in to our blood circulation to circulate around the body to get to all the muscles and organs and tissues in our body that need that supply of nutrition, right? If that barrier is not working like it's supposed to, it's letting whole protein in that's not broken down to its smaller parts, which is amino acids. It's going in as protein, and your immune system is geared to identify foreign protein and create uh, a war against it. All right. So when that whole protein comes in, your immune system goes, "Hey, what are you doing here? You don't belong here." And then it creates antigens which go after it. And then that is where the autoimmunity comes in because um, the immune system gets overtaxed. The protein is too much like your protein, and the immune system becomes fatigued, and then it starts to misfire. It's kind of like in a war, then when there's friendly fire. And if you study war, you find out way, way, way too many people, way too many soldiers met their demise by friendly fire. So inflammation causes the leaky gut, which I just explained that. The leaky gut affects the whole body. The skin is one of the major areas that we see this, but it's also in sinuses in the mouth, um, in the thyroid. So skin things like acne and rosacea, eczema, psoriasis, these are all traceable to leaky gut in the majority of circumstances. In the brain, depression, anxiety, ADHD, frequent colds, food sensitivities. In the joints, arthritis, fibromyalgia, headaches, the adrenal fatigue, and so on. There's so many things that leaky gut triggers. And once you have a leaky gut, you can have multiple of these, multiple combinations of this stuff. So it can really affect everything. Gluten is one of the proteins that will tend to come in and use. There still is some sentiment that if you don't have celiac disease, that gluten's not an issue. But gluten aggravates, if it comes in as a whole protein, it aggravates so many areas. It really is problematic. So what are some signs of inflammation? Depression is a sign of inflammation. Anxiety, anxiousness, signs of inflammation. Headaches, sign of inflammation. Excuse me. Wondering why your labs are all normal, but you're not. So you've got these signs of inflammation that we covered in the previous stream. And you go to the doctor and they run labs. And they say, nothing to see here. Everything's normal. Nothing's showing up on your labs. So could do this, could do that, but nothing's showing up on your labs. Well, if we realize that health is a continuum, or that your lab values are a continuum, that if you get, excuse me, if you get too high, you're pathologically high. If you get too low, you're pathologically low. And that's the red ends of the arrows. And that is where your doctors are looking. If you're in the red or the red high or the red low, you're pathological, and they label you with a disease process, and then they plug you into a treatment protocol. If you're not to the red, but you're not optimal either, you're in the yellow, you're functionally high or functionally low, and you're trending in the wrong direction typically. And then there's an idea of optimal. Now, the only things on the standard medical test are normal and high, normal and low. So there's high or low, and there's normal. And there's two standard deviations that they put that in. If you know anything about statistics and a bell-shaped curve, you got to be in the extremes of the bell-shaped curve to be abnormal and be diagnosed, right? In our world, we're looking at optimizing health. We're looking at optimizing function. We define health not as the absence of illness, but as the ability to function in life the way that you want to. So we would like to know, what's the optimal level for blood glucose? What's the optimal level for a cholesterol level? What's the optimal level for liver enzymes? What's the optimal level for thyroid hormones? Okay. And when we're not at optimal, then the question becomes, can we influence that number through behavior, which, unlike the drugs that we mentioned previously in the study of lowering your cholesterol, lowering your blood pressure, lowering um, your blood sugar, with drugs that you don't end up reducing the risk of death. You do end up reducing the risk of death when you change it through behavior because you're getting the full spectrum of the changes that are occurring to get you to an optimal level. So what we want to know is what is optimal and how can we shift? And we want to track our progress towards the efforts that we're putting to get to an optimal level. And if we try things, exercising a certain way, for instance, and that results in a shift into an optimal level on one of the measurements we're looking at, then we know that that was an effective way to do it. When you might have tried 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 other different combinations of exercise things or dietary things or whatever it is that you're doing, or sleeping patterns, and you didn't move the needle into an optimal level, then you're able to leverage your effort to get the results you're looking for. And know this way of exercising works best for me. This sleep schedule works best for me. This way of eating, this eating schedule, these foods, there's so many variables with these things that we really want to know what's moving the needle to an optimal level, not just eat this way and you're not sick. Okay. So that's why your labs come back normal, even when you don't feel normal. So finding answers to all these things is challenging. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to digress, take a little break, and tell you what a story. I was an athlete in high school, and I was a pretty good one, if I may say so myself. One of the sports and I went to a small school, and we had summer baseball, so there were 4 sports. One of the sports I was able to do because we had summer baseball was track. And it turned out that I did pretty well in track. And when I was a freshman, um, I was probably, I wasn't anywhere near the top. I was a scrawny kid. But one of the people I got to know, and in track, you have a lot of time to sit around and talk with your competitors because you're over at the high jump pit and there's only one person can be practicing at a time. Everybody else is sitting around stretching and kind of taking turns doing their jumps, adjusting the bar to the height that they want to practice at, and so on and so on and so on. So there's a lot of time to talk. And I got to be good friends with a guy named Joe Clayfish who happened to date my cousin too, so he liked me. He was a senior and he was actually a decathlete at the Naval Academy. Um, Shortly, he graduated in 72. And so in the mid to late 70s, he was at the academy and he was sort of a second tier decathlete. He was not a Olympic level, but he was in the tier below the Olympic level, guys. So he's probably a top 25, 30 decathlete in the country. Anyway, it was, what heat are you running in? So this was the conference meet trials, and you ran a trial run and to qualify for the finals. And I said, I'm in the first heat. And he said, so am I. What lane are you in? And I said, I'm in lane 5. He said, I'm in lane 3. And he said, he looked at me, he said, tell you what, keep up with me, I'll get you into the finals. And so I'm a freshman thinking it's like, and I had to run as fast as I could every time, just in the trials to make the finals. And he said, Mike, I'm not going to run as fast as I can, or fast. Yeah, I'm not going to run as fast as I can. I'm just going to run fast enough to get into the finals. This is just a warm up for me. And he said, I'll pace you. He said, I will make sure that we're going fast enough that we both get in the finals. And I'm like, yeah, you're Joe Clayfish. I'm a scrawny freshman. And anyway, he just said, just trust me, keep up with me. And I'm like, okay. And we race started, and the first 30 yards or so was down near the end of the track, and 30 yards in, 40 yards in of this 120-yard race, we catch the end where we hit the end of the grandstand where all the fans are, and the people are screaming and hollering, and I'm a step or so in front of Joe. And, I'm sure people are thinking, what's wrong with Joe? He's the #1 hurdler in the conference and he's in second place in the trials. And so he let me be in front during the whole time in the grandstand. And then as we reached the far end of the grandstand, had about another 30 yards to run, he kicked it in and went into the higher gear and went past me and broke the tape on the finish line. And I was right behind him. And he turned around with a big grin. He said, "See, I told you." And the point of that is, if you got the right mentor, it's not that hard, right? The right mentor can make stuff much easier. So that's the point now. So this is my paying back in a different part of life, but simplifying things with a mentor. So what is next? So I will tell you that the greatest medicine of all, I love this quote from Hippocrates. And so this is like a new age thing, right? The greatest medicine of all is teaching people how not to need it. That's my goal. I like using medicines that have the smallest footprint when necessary, but I like teaching people how not to use medication if at all possible. And that is really the intent of this presentation and what I want to talk about from here. There are basically 5 pillars for health. There's the digestive health and detox. Your body needs to have the ability to assimilate quality inputs, the fuel, and get rid of the junk. You need to have good nutrition. You need to be eating the right food. You need to get the dietary supplements that your foods are not giving you. You need balance in your hormones. You need to move. You need to exercise. And everybody wants their brains to work well. We want good cognitive function. So, are you ready for this new and different approach? Because what the pharmaceutical industry, what the healthcare industry wants to do is sell you some drugs. But by the way, so those of you on there that are out there that are on drugs, and I would assume that most of you are, because otherwise you wouldn't be interested in watching this. When do you get to get off, if you're listed medications, when do you go off of medication 1, medication 2, medication 3, medication 4? What's the exit strategy? And the answer is, I don't think there is an exit strategy for you, and I think that's a really good strategy for the company selling you the drugs. You're a customer for life. And then they tell you how dangerous it is if you try to become an uncustomer. And I'm going to tell you there is some danger in that too. So please don't try that, but rather develop a strategy to exit effectively. So who's ready for the new approach? We use testing, we use treatments, and we use teaching to help people. And so this is a teaching part right now that we're focused on here. Testing to determine where to focus, natural treatments, and lifestyle coaching with accountability. What are the important questions to ask? What if it is possible to improve your health without needing drugs? How will that impact your future? How does that affect your relationships? How will that affect your ability to function? How will that impact your enjoyment on life? And I will tell you that management of chronic illnesses eases you into your grave. It does not make you better. It just makes it less painful. On a scale of 1 to 10, how motivated are you to really take care of this problem? The value of a mentor, tell me, and I may remember, show me, I will remember, involve me, and I will understand. And it is my goal that you understand, and isn't it just interesting that this is a Chinese proverb, since Eastwind is a Chinese medicine facility. We have choices. We like choices. You have two. Choice 1 is you can do nothing and continue to get the same results you've been getting. Or choice number 2 is you can take the next step in taking charge of your health. It's a small commitment, so act now. We're calling this your Medication Reduction Act, and what this involves is a consultation, a personalized review of your medications, and a plan of action. The normal cost of this would be $287, and we will do this today for $87 because you've watched this and because I care and because I want to find people who are motivated to reduce their medications. In order to reduce your medications, you're going to need a strategy. You're going to need to understand which ones are removable and which ones are not, what the process is. You would need to work with the prescriber to reduce your reliance on those medications, and you're going to have to supplement with other healthy behaviors in order to replace the need for those medications. So those of you who are motivated to consider such things, $87, sit down, talk to me, send me your list of medications. I'll review it and I'll go over this stuff with you and I'll tell you what I think and I'll give you a plan of action and we'll consult about it. We'll probably spend an hour, but when Mike says he spends an hour, it's usually an hour and a half. So we're happy to do that. If you want to do that, just enter it in the comments, reach out to us. You can call us at 920-997-0511. That's 920-997-0511 to tell us that you saw this and you want to do this. Otherwise, email us, call us, and we'll be happy to oblige. So I hope this was helpful to you. I hope this was enlightening. I got to do a run through on this for the first time. I created this. I can see some things I want to change a little bit, but I appreciate you considering this, and I hope that I can pay back some of the generosity I got from the mentors that I worked with at different points in my life and provide you with a mentor to help you get to a healthier, more functional place in your life. So with that, there's no questions. I will say bye-bye.